I'd like to welcome everyone and wish everyone Happy New Year and welcome to the first of the Education and Children's Services Subcommittee. Now, Scrutiny Committee. Thank you. Right, I just wanted to say that we have got quite a big agenda tonight, and I'm sure all of you are quite excited about this agenda. But I am going to try and get us to finish by 9, if that's all right. So, without further ado, we'll just go around the table to see who's here, and then we'll crack on. I'll start. I'm Jasmine Ali, and I'm very privileged to be the chair of this committee. And we'll go this way and then back round there.
Okay. My name's Kath Whittam. I'm a councillor in Rotherhithe Ward and Deputy Mayor of Southwark.
Welcome.
Julie Timble, I'm the project manager for the committee.
And I'm Councillor Sonny Lamb, Councillor for South Bermondsey Ward and also Vice Chair of Bermondsey and Rotherhithe Community Council.
I'm Martin Brettle, I'm a co-opted member from the Anglican Diocese of Southwark.
My name's Lynette Murphy-O'Dwyer. I'm a co-opted member from the Archdiocese of Southwark.
I'm Councillor Sandra Rule and I'm the Labour member for Nunhead Ward and Vice Chair of Sacray.
So just doing introductions.
I'm Councillor James Colston, member for Surrey Docks Ward and Lib Dem spokesperson for young people and children.
Welcome and Happy New Year to you.
Same to you.
So, have we got any apologies?
Yeah, we do. We've got one from George Ogabana.
George. Are we expecting Lisa tonight?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. That's very good. Okay, so are there any notification of any items of business which the chair deems urgent? No? No, excellent. Disclosure of interests and dispensations.
No, from me.
No, nothing? Okay. The minutes then. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes? Well, everything that we would want to discuss is actually on the agenda, so should we just move on? Are the minutes approved?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed, thank you. Okay, I'd like to introduce Michael O'Connor, Independent Safeguard Chair for Children and for Adults. So that's a recent development and we're very glad to see that. So if you'd like to join us, and Rory Patterson, our Head of Children Care Service. Okay, now this is quite a lot of business that we've got here. My understanding is that we've got the Safeguarding Children's Board annual report, and we're also looking at the serious case review. So, Michael, we'll be led by you. How
Okay.
to do it.
I'm just going to give you a very short introduction, and maybe I just want to give you an introduction to speak about the serious case reviews and something about the process in the background.
Should we do that first?
Yeah, and then we can
Quite
look at the
right.
annual report. So just first of all, thank you for inviting me to come to the committee, and I think it's good that we're having this, both the annual report and the serious case review, because both are important documents, and certainly the case review is a very important piece of work around a very serious case of abuse for a child who was looked after by Southwark Council. So just to say something about the serious case review. The role of the Safeguarding Children's Board is to make sure that all agencies that work to protect and safeguard children work well together, and that's a key part of my role as chair and the board. And no matter how well the interagency partnership works, and I have to say I think in Southwark it works well, there's always going to be a time when, for a variety of reasons, things don't work as well as possible. And it's the role of the Safeguarding Board to look into that and to identify what went wrong or what happened in those cases and try and remedy that and make sure people understand from that what needs to change and improve. Working together, which is the national guidance, sets out the statutory framework for the board about how safeguarding works in a particular area, and it requires the board to carry out what's called a serious case review when a child or a young person suffers serious harm or abuse or dies, and there is evidence that the multi-agency partnership has not worked as well as it should be doing. previously, I think about 3 years ago and before that, serious case reviews were long, laborious processes which took a long time, were very expensive processes, and tended to kind of be a process to look at who didn't do what they should have been doing and to apportion blame. And it was generally felt that they weren't helpful and they didn't actually help people learn what they should do better the next time or how they should improve practice. After a lot of consideration, the Social Care Institute for Excellence developed a model of carrying out serious case reviews with a lot of involvement from practitioners and people in the field. And that was further adapted by the Welsh Assembly to ensure that serious case reviews were carried out as a learning and improvement tool, and to be carried out in a much more precise, time-consuming way. There's no specific requirement for any particular model to be used under the working together. You just have to make sure you cover the issues and learn from it. So this serious case review was carried out under the Welsh model, which is a slightly less elaborate model than the Sky model. And we've used it to ensure that the findings of the report have been shared with a wide range of practitioners across all agencies in half-day sessions over the summer. I think we had probably, all in all, about 350 to 400 staff who've taken part in what we call learning events. So that's important because it shows that we've been trying to share the findings and the learning from the serious case review. Finally, on the process, the serious case review has to be submitted to the review to the National Serious Case Review Panel, which scrutinises SCRs, and we've had no adverse feedback about that. So, just going on to what happened, as you can see from the report, it's a very serious case of sexual abuse of a young woman who's looked after by the council and has very complex elements to it. As chair of the board, I think the serious case review was a good piece of work, and then it identified a number of issues which needed to be addressed. Those issues were monitored by an action plan, which from a small group of the board, which I chair, and I can say that I think those actions have been followed through since about 2014.
2014.
Yeah, and I think we've pretty much covered all the actions on that action plan. So I just wanted to say that as a way of a brief introduction. I'm happy to answer any questions, and Rory's obviously here to answer any questions about the case in much more detail.
Well, thanks for that, Michael. That's very useful. I've done all the reading. Presumably everyone's seen all the reports. Rory, did you want to say anything before you opened it? Because you've done this comprehensive briefing at the beginning. Did you want to add anything to that? Or?
Only that in many ways it's typical of the complexity of the cases that we see in Southwark. This is a child who spent her early years abroad, not actually living in Southwark. It was only as she got older, she was brought up by her grandmother, as she got older that she moved joined her mother in this country, and that she was in a very unstable home situation, living with siblings, and she experienced a lot of violence in her early years and disorganised attachment, so she wasn't forming attachment with her key caregivers. So already she was in a situation where she was quite troubled and living in an environment which was very unstable, lots of moves and lots of uncertainty about where she was living. And this presents particular challenges in the care system. In 2009 she was on a child protection plan with her half-siblings, and in 2010 they all came into care and were on care orders. Then there was a whole series of issues around placement, the challenges of placements, which multiple changes and changes of social worker, and there's vulnerability in that when you've not got the same person holding the case, and where the caregivers change quite quickly as well. Ironically, the placement she was in that's the placement she's still in, was the best placement she'd had out of all the previous placements. When the incident happened, and had been quite stable and had been going to school, and what alerted people, of course, concerned was when she didn't get to school, and we're not entirely sure how it happened, but this predatory male got her phone number and contacted her by phone and arranged this meeting. So,
The report says a friend gave the number.
Well, that's what we think. That's what we think happened. Is like to a friend. So it was less grooming by social media, more about sharing phone numbers with the wrong people, and he sort of was able to persuade her to go there, and that's when the incident happened. The good thing was that she felt able to contact her carers, and they did absolutely the right thing. The police were able to get involved and apprehended the perpetrator, which had a good outcome. He was subsequently convicted of offences, although not this particular offence, because that never pursued through to trial. Nonetheless, he did serve a custodial sentence because it was known he had committed other similar offences. So a lot of learning, arising out of that, particularly for the Children's Social Care Service. I can say that there's been a lot of progress in the service since 2014, and would highlight that we've commissioned St Christopher's, who do the missing return interviews, which is one of the concerns around children who go missing, that we have an independent voluntary organisation that undertakes these interviews, because there is generally a belief that young people may better engage with somebody who's not a social worker or a police officer. So social workers and police officers visit, but young people tend not to share their concerns with them. So we have an independent organisation that does return visits. We also have Safer London, which is another voluntary organisation that specialises in work with young people at risk of child sexual exploitation. So we've got those two agencies working very much together. Through our MASH, where we do a lot of triangulation and operational investigation around young people who may be vulnerable with the police. So we've got a much tighter system picking up on young people who go missing from care, and a much sort of stronger, robust system around those sorts of incidents. So we feel we've made a lot of progress since then, and the service itself has stabilised quite a bit, because that was one of the issues around turnover. So we're seeing a much more permanent workforce and strengthened management arrangements. By that I mean I've got more senior management presence on that site to help with the oversight of the work they're doing there. So quite a lot of changes since 2014.
Excellent. Okay. It feels such a long time, doesn't it? And that's a norm, a couple of years for the serious case review. But that doesn't stop people from...
Well, I mean, the serious case review should be finished within 6 months.
Oh, right, okay.
And I think that was pretty much... I think the only thing we were held back by was the review from the police. Because it's a centralised system of covering what the police role is, and you see there was contentious issues to do with the police around the placement issue. And we were held back by that. But that didn't mean there were things that were coming out which as we were always saying, we were dealing with straight away. We didn't wait for it all to be finished until it was managed. So I think all in all, it's I think we've in a sense completed the whole process now, and that's where we are.
I mean, I've just got a couple of questions, and then, if I may, and then I'll open it out. Yeah, okay. I mean, this is a difficult question, but given the set of circumstances that she found herself in, the different placements, even though, oddly, the placement that she was at was finally quite secure, and then the issue of the history, not knowing the earlier history, which you pointed out in your report. Are we in any risk of that happening to anyone else in our system? It's a difficult question, but do you know what I mean? I mean, that's something that must keep you awake every night, Michael, but are we in...
I feel this was a really good example of how people learn from something that didn't work well, and that has... you can never say it's going to be perfectly resolved in the future, or that nothing will ever happen, because the staff changed, things change, and you have to watch this continuously. But I think Rory has got a structure in place now where he has a much greater not an oversight, because always have the oversight, but much more kind of day-to-day understanding of what is happening around individual children, and this is what this throws up, really. If you can learn from this, then it's less likely to happen.
Yeah.
but you can't eradicate it. It's impossible for me to say it's never going to happen again. But I think the chances of it happening again are much less than before this happened. But I think it's inevitable that it's a very complex case, and I think that the issues for the young woman herself actually is that she was very hard to engage with, and that didn't help either. So it was a very complex set of circumstances.
Yeah, she kept going missing, didn't she? How's she doing now?
She's doing well. She's doing well in that placement. Continues to be there. So.
But she was also beginning to do her GCSEs.
Yes, that's right. So she's turned it around somewhat. That's the benefit, the stability of the placement. But I was just going to say, we do get the regular missing from care monitor, so that comes through to me every day. You don't need it every day. It just pops up, so I can glance at any change in status. But we have weekly meetings about who's missing, and it ties in with the operational meeting in the MASH, where they're looking at all the data and concerns about children like missing from education, missing from care, missing from home, and where there's a sexual exploitation risk. There's a lot of triangulation there that wasn't going on back in the beginning of 2014.
Can I just say one other thing about in terms of learning from it? I think the learning events were very successful. We had a lot of social care staff coming to the September events, and so that was a way of the board reaching frontline practitioners rather than having to go through Rory and his managers all the time. And what we were saying to them is, this is for you to reflect on your own practice. So I'm hoping that makes a difference.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it must do. Okay, well, thank you for that. I've got one more question before I open it out. On all of it, it felt like it was jumping out, this issue about the social media. And, one of the things that I wanted to say, you won't be surprised to hear me saying, is that I did raise this with you around child sexual exploitation. We felt that, I'd located some people who might be able to work with us to actually help us use social media in a way which would help us protect children from sexual abuse as opposed to the other side of the coin. Now, we didn't want to pursue that because we were integrating some IT systems, but I'm wondering whether now would be the time, really, to innovate around that.
I think we should look at it, because since this happened, we have now got an e-safety policy, and that's something which can't be a static policy, because it's every week or month it's changing. It's already out of date by the time we produced it. So I think that will be looked at through Rory's CSE subgroup, and if it's a question of looking at it from the other point of view, but how can we use social media to protect children, I think we should look at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But the other thing is we've got a subgroup of the board which is called Change Makers, which is the young people's group, and we're hoping they will help us look at that issue so they know what's happening, whereas we don't.
Yeah. Okay, well, we can, put a partnership together. I mean, I mentioned Future Girl because they've been doing some really good work on patchwork, and they, and I think they've got off-the-shelf products which might be cheap. Do you know what I mean? To actually use in this way. So that sounds good. Working with young people and partners in this area. Okay, thank you very much for that. Now I'm going to open it out, and I've seen Kath first, and anyone else who wants to. Right, okay, thank you. And you, thank you. Kath?
Okay, I had several things written down, which you've already mentioned. I think this was pre-MASH, wasn't it? The actual incident, or was it just
probably?
Yeah, well, we were establishing our MASH then. Yeah. It's been growing over the years, and we're getting more and more.
A lot.
But it's also where we have an operational group now looking at all of the missing children, which we didn't have back then.
And I think St Christopher's will help too in our understanding of why children go missing. And I know it can be all very individual, but there may be patterns that we can pick up. So that's good. Turnover of staff and caseloads. It's good that we are hopefully keeping the budget steady and not having to take megabucks out of our children in care budget, so that we can keep the caseloads manageable for people, and that will stop a lot of the stress and a lot of the going off sick with stress. So the more we can do to help that as a council, the better. But one thing I did want to raise was the record keeping. It seems to be in the narrative a lot of it's not known if this was done or that was done because things weren't recorded. Is that being addressed?
Yeah.
Is it being made easier to keep those records so that people can see at a glance and don't have to plough through?
Yeah. Well, we've moved from Care First to a system known as Mosaic. So we've had a whole procurement, commissioning, and implementation of a new social care recording system since then. And that does enable you to develop genograms and chronologies much more effectively than the other system would, and also it makes the recording of events and activities much clearer. You also get a whole family view on the new system, whereas in the old system you didn't. So there's a lot of additions to that system which improve the recording experience for social workers. We've also
you need to be able to see at a glance what's happened if there's some mega emergency.
Yeah, that's right. You need to be able to look and see the history and be able to look back at that.
That's me.
Okay, thank you for that. And now I've seen James and Sunny, followed by Lisa and Lynette, which takes us round. Okay, James?
Two very brief questions. It says here that the child returned to South East London on a Monday, and she didn't attend school on that same day. Did that last for the whole day? I mean, was she reported missing in the evening or the next day? Because I'm just a bit mindful that if she didn't turn up at school, did they report that, and knowing fully well that she's a looked after child? And that's the first question. And I think Kath touched on the second question, which is a high turnover of staff. Obviously, you have agency social workers as well as permanent. How do you make provisions for that? I understand that people have to move on at the end of the contracts, and you have to let people go because of cost and the rest of it. So have you considered how that would impact, people, young people in care?
Yeah, as I recall, the foster carers were alerted there was a concern because the child wasn't at school. So that was the first thing. So there was a concern that she hadn't turned up at school, and that
by the school.
Yes, I believe so. And that's how the foster carers were aware that she hadn't actually turned up. Yes, recruitment and retention of social workers tends to be an ongoing sort of problem. But we've been part of what's known as a South London Teaching Partnership, which is all about how we work with other authorities in South East London, Lewisham, Greenwich, ourselves leading on it with I've forgotten the name of the university now. And Newcastle, Goldsmiths University. And so we've formed a teaching partnership with Goldsmiths University, so that it's supplying our new social workers that are coming into our system. So in terms of recruitment and retention, you've got to grow your own to an extent. So you do recruit. So you can try and recruit experienced social workers. That can be quite challenging. But at the same time, bringing social workers through, newly qualified, very bright, high caliber people that we're seeing coming through the universities now and getting into we call it an assessed year in social work. So they come in, they have a year where they go through a program where they're developing portfolios, are being supervised, and they have smaller caseloads. And then they move in, they're already in our system, but they get supported by the fact that we have reflective practice groups where you get the chance to talk about your casework, so they get the supervision, they get the opportunity to discuss their cases, and they develop as social workers. And we're growing them through our system in that way, whilst at the same time we're running recruitment campaigns to attract more experienced people into the system. Now, with the combination of our teaching partnership, our aspirations, we're doing some work now around what we call the Social Work Academy, which builds on the teaching partnership and provides an offer right the way through the various tiers of the organisation for the development of staff. It's a very powerful thing. to offer, and it will attract and keep people. We think with that offer and the sort of social work approach that we have in Southwark, that we're going to see, and it already is coming through. You see in the report, it refers to it's not the case now, so there's stability working its way through the workforce. We made some adjustments to our structure to make sure that it stays strong, that social workers can have the supervision when they need it, and that there's the right management oversight.
Sounds good.
So just a quick lead on. Of the 100%, in terms of the looked after children's team, how many of those social workers are agency? You know, I know that's quite specific.
Yeah, I haven't got the. It's about 10%.
That's
So,
quite low.
well, we're sort of about 20% if you remember a year or so ago. So I think we're showing a lot of progress there.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to pick up from the point he made earlier about it was the best thing that could have happened to this young person out of all the placements in the places this person's been placed in the past. But yet, she was still a victim. And then there was another point made that she was not engaging. Now, if she wasn't engaging and yet she suffered this, did anybody think there should have been a reason why she wasn't engaging, and therefore there should be a mechanism in place to find out why she wasn't engaging before she got into this additional problem she encountered in the process?
No, I think that's a good point. There was where she was engaging was with the foster carers, so that made a real difference to her, that they were able to get alongside her, be more of a parent to her, and that relationship was very, very constructive. She was still very much drawn back into Southwark, so she was making the journeys back into Southwark to school, and also visiting a local youth organisation. So she was engaging with some parts of the system and doing that quite well, because she was doing well in school at that time as well. They noticed when she hadn't turned up. Sometimes it's the role of social workers as authority figures. So whether we like it or not, families see us as the ones who sort of split them apart. And there was a very powerful pull for her to go back. She kept running back to mum in spite of all the difficulties there'd been within the family and the sort of neglectful issues and violence in the past. So a very powerful driver for young people to go back, both into the area, back into Southwark, but also around the family. So, I mean, we do. I think it's a good point about how we engage then when we feel the social work relationship is a bit stuck, and what other means we might have. So, which is partly why we brought in St Christopher's, so a slightly different approach. We've done a lot of training with social workers about how we might work better with people and the approaches to working with people where there might be some opposition. You might be the danger is you're getting into a bit of an argument with them. We've done a lot of training for our social workers about how you might work with that, both with parents and with children. So how you can have a much more positive and constructive relationship. But that's quite a challenge working through, particularly with young people, young adults or young teenagers who might not want to do as they're being told by a social worker. But nonetheless, we've done a lot of training there, and we've also looked at what other ways there are into the relationship to try and engage. And our job is to keep trying and looking at different ways. If it's not working, don't stop there. We'll use mentors. We'll bring in other people to look at how we can form that relationship.
Just a follow-up question. Okay, do you want to?
I just wanted to say something about it. I think if you think about what was happening at the time for this young person, there was a sort of, how I would describe a collective sigh of relief that she was able to be held in a good placement after a number of different placements. So you move from what's the biggest risk that if she's in lots of different placements, you really have no idea what's happening. And then she moved into this place, and people were relieved that she was in one place and she was going back. And I think people did understand there were things that they ought to be trying to find out about what she was doing, but it's incredibly difficult. And I think if you look at what's happening now, we're far more, I think the whole system's far more alerted to the possibilities of sexual abuse and child sexual abuse, and there's far more understanding of that and of the risks of that when children are going missing and you don't know where they are. And so there's a big run. And I think the other thing is that's the reason why we have a young people's group working to the board to help us try and understand and engage better with young people, because it is incredibly difficult when someone doesn't want to tell you what they are doing. And there isn't a secret, there isn't one way of trying to find that out, because it'll be different for every different young person.
Amazing that also the case, from what you said earlier, if this young person, despite the fact that she's been placed somewhere, she was still going back to the same family. Now, if that was the case, doesn't that suggest to us that actually maybe we should be looking at how can we make it better, work better for the family before we start thinking about outside placement? Because if she still keep on running back to the same family, obviously there's something wrong here. And what lessons should we be learning from there in order to make sure at least the child is central to the decision-making process?
I think the other thing to say is that the whole legal framework for taking court orders for children has changed in the last 3 or 4 years, and that there is much more attempts to work with a young person and their family rather than remove them. But I think once again you have to go through a process of what's the biggest risk, and however much a child or a young person is harmed in a family, their natural inclination is to want to go back.
And in fact, that's where the majority of missing children are, isn't it? They go back to their families. Which makes it a completely knotty issue to deal with.
But the issue is, I do understand that, but the issue is, shouldn't we be exploring that maybe extended family or other ways rather than,
and we do.
And that's what happens.
We do. When any child who's at risk of coming into care, we always have a family group conference, and that's run by an independent organisation that they work with the family to identify who all the possible carers might be, and they bring the family together. It doesn't have the social worker there, and they look at what the family might be able to provide. So that's pretty standard for nowadays for any child that might be coming into care.
I mean, nationally, the rates of children being adopted have dropped off, and there have been far more orders around what's called guardianship, haven't there, which is members of the extended family looking after those children.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I forgot my word, Lisa, and then
Thank you. Firstly, I apologise for lateness, Chair. I'm sorry about that. And I therefore also apologise if I'm asking you something that you've already covered. But I had 2 quick questions. One was about whether or not there's a way of putting a special flag on the system when it's a person who's particularly at risk of child sexual exploitation, and particularly if they're a teenage girl, just so that everybody is, that's sort of top of mind and gets flagged up. And then my second question was about the secure accommodation issue. And apologies if I haven't quite understood it, but I just wondered what the fallback situation is. I mean, I understand that it's very rare, probably, that secure accommodation is needed to be found at short notice. But I just wondered what the position was around that. And I'm aware that this council has a secure accommodation panel, of which I've been nominated to for about the past 8 years, actually. And as far as I'm aware, it's never sat. And so I don't know if we're doing all we can to make sure that we're there ready with secure accommodation if we're in a situation like this where it's needed.
Yes. Okay. The first bit was the flag. So we do have a way of identifying and those young people at risk. So we've got missing children, so children missing from care. We've also got a list of those that have been reported missing from home, so they're in the community, and they've been reported missing. That goes through our MASH. We've got the missing from care that goes into our MASH, and then we've got the risk matrix for those who we believe might be at risk of sexual exploitation. So we're always looking at what the crossover is between those lists, and because when you bring them all together, you might find somebody who's even higher. That'll tell you stuff that you might not see if you're just looking at one list over here. So who's popping up in the various areas of concern? So we bring all that together, and then we prioritise. So it's not so much a flag, but it's an ongoing, because situations change from week to week. Things will happen, and so it's a kind of live, dynamic process where we're constantly looking at who's coming onto the system, what their priority is, who might be moving off because their circumstances have changed. So that's a live process that's going on week in, week out to identify them. And then secure accommodation. We will use secure accommodation if we need it. I'm surprised 8 years. I think we have used secure accommodation in the last 8 years, but we'll need to.
I think, I remember that query came up about that secure accommodation panel, and I will dig up my email and recirculate it so we can get concurrency with that.
But there's something in place for these emergency situations.
Yes, so we will use it.
It comes across like
it's extraordinarily difficult to get secure accommodation, and we found we've gone nationally because the circumstances have changed around the provision of secure accommodation. It used to be all run by local authorities, but now it tends to be private providers. So even if you're looking at, with a young person who had a criminal background, who were looking for secure accommodation, they can choose whether to accept that placement or not. Very, very high demand. So you can't always get those placements. Lots of authorities, because of the concerns about sexual exploitation, you've seen quite an increase in the number, particularly of girls, going into secure accommodation provision. So if we haven't got secure, we will look at another alternative. So if there's not availability, we'll say, well, possibly residential care where they have quite a sort of, strong level of supervision, quite a good structure around it, and we'll explore what possibilities there might be, and reluctantly we will move some children out of their area. So it's not quite so straightforward. They're in London. They might be in an area where there are people who already know they're vulnerable and will take advantage of that. But having said that, when you move children, young people to other parts of the country, there are risks in those other parts of the country as well, and it makes it difficult if they're so far away. You might not see the issues quite in the same way. So there's risks no matter what you do, whether you keep them local in the vulnerability or whether you decide let's get them right out of here and away from where the concerns are. That we've got some of these adults are very predatory, and they have ways of getting in touch with and grooming the most vulnerable young people.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Reference was made to missing education for the young person, and clearly at 15 that's absolutely critical if somebody misses their education at that time. And I wondered what provision you put in place to ensure that they are supported, and where they have missed part of their education, whether that's a week or more, even part of a week might be critical for their learning. What you put in place to support them in order that it is topped up, if you like.
Yeah, well, we try and ensure that all young people in care get the education they're entitled to, but there's also a pupil premium for those young people
I know
need
that.
additional.
That's covered by.
Well, we've got a virtual school and a virtual head teacher, and part of their role is to be looking at the needs of all of the children in care and what extra we might need to put in place to ensure they get good outcomes in education. So the virtual head teacher and their team, which we've recently expanded quite significantly, are keeping track of every child in every school, wherever they might be, and advocating on their behalf, and if necessary, putting in additional resources, whether it's additional one-to-one or additional tuition, or in some cases individual tuition for young people. So they're tracked, and the education attainment is tracked through our system.
So it's tracked, and if the pupil premium money isn't sufficient in a school, because it's very often isn't sufficient, given that it isn't 100% of the needs, that 100% of the needs are not necessarily met by a pupil premium, what would happen there?
Well, where necessary, if we think it's appropriate for the needs of that child, we would assist.
Right. Fine.
So we have made provision for some young people in exceptional circumstances.
Okay. And I just have one more. You've mentioned before that foster carers, you know, are good foster carers are not difficult to come by, but it is a complex training, and it is also very demanding on the foster carers. What's the current position in regard to having sufficient foster carers?
Well, we've just, we don't think we've got enough, because we're trying to bring more children and young people into the borough. So we've just launched, you may have seen it, but we've just launched this campaign. It's been in the local media, various other places. So anything that members can do to really raise the profile of fostering in the borough would be really helpful. We think we can recruit more people to be local, because that's where our children and young people want to be, and it's the right place for them. Also means they can still access the excellent schools that we have in Southwark.
So what proportion of additional foster carers have you been able to recruit in regard to last year, for instance?
Well, we're in the process of that recruitment. We've lost foster carers because we've got an ageing foster care population, and we've had more retirements than we've had coming through. So whilst we have been getting new carers coming through, not as many as we would like, we've reinvigorated the recruitment campaign.
Yes, no, that you've explained.
So we're sort of pushing that out now.
So you're still in... We still
feel we're short. At the same time, the overall care population has gone down.
In Southwark, but not nationally.
In Southwark, yeah.
So are you concerned, very concerned, or do you feel you're going to be able to manage it in terms of getting additional foster families?
I think we'll be able to get additional foster carers. It looks like an impressive campaign, and I'd be very surprised if we weren't able to bring people through, not just in Southwark, but also in neighbouring authorities where young people can still be close to their homes.
Well, you can rely on members to help support that. Yeah. Now, that was a great question, because that segued into the next part of the agenda, which is on the actual Southwark Safeguarding Children report. So, okay. Sorry, Michael. Just before we put that, we've made a note of the discussion, Michael and Rory, and what we will do is we will, in the interests of transparency, we will send a note directly to the Safeguarding Board, so that you've got, captured the issues and you don't have to rely on your own notes, because I think there were some good points there, and it was quite a useful discussion. And any recommendations that flow from that, we can agree between us. So, Michael, without further ado, on to your excellent report.
Okay, just very brief introduction. This is annual report, and we're required by working together to produce an annual report. And actually, whenever Ofsted come to inspect the local authority and the Children's Safeguarding Board, they will be looking at this report to see whether it's up to standard. What my aim since I've been here is to really reduce the size of the report and keep it as simple and straightforward as possible. And I think what I would say is it's been a difficult, challenging year, but I think we've made a lot of good progress in the last year. One of our biggest preoccupations has been around child sexual exploitation, and that's really has taken up a lot of time and any focus from the whole multi-agency partnership. But I think we're making good progress, and that's one thing. And that's the other thing that the Safeguarding Board has really pushed very hard in Southwark is about family matters and trying to tackle neglect in Southwark through multi-agency working, and we're making good progress on that. In addition to that, we have to continually make sure we're tackling and making sure that the core business, that's the work around children looked after and children on plans, is satisfactorily carried out by all the partners. So we have what is a very big process of work going on through auditing and talking to partners about what's happening on that. And I think the report sets out basically the work that we've done over the last year, our priorities for next year, which continue to really be challenging, like FGM and the other things that we're already dealing with. So I don't think I want to say anything else other than that and take any questions.
Before I open it out, I'll just quickly, I just wondered really, because it is a shorter report, I think, I agree with you about the child sexual exploitation. I think that in the last year we've seen some good work on that, haven't we? I mean, that campaign, we had a discussion here last time, and I think, that campaign is very eye-catching, and I think I suddenly realised what you meant about not having to, my approach from the scrutiny point of view is that we must, make everyone aware, of the threat of sexual exploitation, but I think you're right. That campaign does it quite well. It invites you in without, putting you right off, and you think about, the threat of child sexual exploitation in the borough, and it's everyone's business to stop that. So I think that's very good. I think, I'm not sure whether it's here to raise that, because we'd had a bit of a discussion about the changing nature of adoption and care. I'm not quite sure, in terms of safeguarding children in care, I'm not quite sure where it's going now, because my understanding is that the government, they want to continue, with pushing adoption, and that's a key area. But then, there are other things, the more pressure to keep people in the family. And I just wondered, from an insider's point of view, where you think that's going to go, because that will have impacts on the strategy.
Well, I mean, adoption, if you like, is the most ultimate form of safeguarding a child or young person, because you're actually making sure they've got a good family to be looked after. So we, from the safeguarding board's point of view, our role is to challenge all the agencies, particularly the social, the council and its social care work around looked after children, to see that they're making the best decisions and plans. And we had what we call, inverted commas, a deep dive into looked after children. It's one of the areas we look at all the time. So in our regular performance framework, which is, I think, reported every other board meeting, we look at the numbers of children looked after, adoptions and all those issues, so that we have an idea of what's going on. So I suppose what I'm saying is, but I think the other thing is that practice has changed a lot. So in terms of some of it, I mean, Rory can speak in a bit more detail, a bit more removed from it, about the new sort of family justice, the change in the court systems and things like that around. So whilst the government is right, it is right to say there should be more adoptions, some of that legal process has become more complicated.
Yes.
In the sense that you have to try lots of different things before you can get a final order to remove a child, let alone then place them for adoption. So it's a very complicated area.
But Ed Simpson seemed to be telling the Association of Directors Children's Services last year not to worry that wasn't going to be a thing. And it feels that.
Well, I don't know what. I mean, I suppose I'm just trying as chair of the board to focus on what needs to happen in Southwark and what we need to do in Southwark. And we have a good relationship. The board has a good relationship with all partners, but particularly Rory as the sort of lead safeguarding agency.
Yeah, and then I suppose the other point was the point that I raised before about the child sexual exploitation in social media, and then finally the point on female genital mutilation, really, that there's some joint work between the Scrutiny Committee and your.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say something about CSE. We are continuing to develop and refine how we tackle CSE. So where we are now is a completely different place to where we were 2 years ago. And I think it is time to review that. And one of the most important things is creating a profile and an understanding of those children who are most likely to be at risk, but also where in Southwark there are likely to be hotspots or particular issues that we need as a partnership and as the council needs to address. That's one thing, and that work has been done through the subgroup. But the other thing which I feel very positive about, which I should have said in my introduction, is the amazing work our Young People's Shadow Board does in terms of helping us understand how better we should engage with young people. And one of the things you hopefully you'll be getting is they've produced what they call a charter for the board, setting out principles by which they expect all professionals and all agencies to work with them, and that's just about to hit we're just about to publish that. But I see that group as being quite very important in helping inform us and Rory's subgroup how better we understand the issues for young people and so on.
And that reminds me, because when we were looking at the minutes, we felt that there was some sort of, a real push for you to get much more involved with young people. That really came across, so that's obviously happening now. My last question, I think.
Do you want to say something about FGM?
Yeah, no, I can't.
Oh, sorry.
Go on.
Well, just to say, after the work you started, as you know, we're going to have a conference, I think it's on March the 8th, which is a joint conference, and you should be getting information about that shortly. So that is just one step in the process of, if you like, developing how Southwark as a partnership will tackle FGM.
Excellent. And we can contribute that from a Scrutiny perspective. Fantastic.
And as you know, we've given you a slot on it.
Yes, fantastic. Okay, we've captured that on film just in case. My last point, sorry, because I can see everyone's itching to come in, is are the minutes being published now?
Well, we're just about to completely redo our website.
Oh, right.
And it should be going live at the end of this month, I'm told. And it is it's an excellent website. It's based on the council send all their special educational needs website. Yeah. So rather than, I'm going to be honest, rather than spend a lot of time looking back at what's been happening, from now on we're going to have a very much more accessible website. And I'm hoping it'll be live by the end of this month. And therefore the minutes will be published.
Well, that's great to hear. So I'm going to open it out now, and as always, I'll start with Kath.
Can you just tell us how many people are in the Changemakers group, and have they got any crossover with Speakerbox?
First thing to say, it's a changing group, because each year they get some young people are growing up and moving on. So it's not a static group, and we're in the process of completely redoing it. So what I could let you what I could send you is a copy of the, if you like, the work plan to develop that group, which was presented to the board last week. Yeah. But what the aim of that is to complete. We have had input from Speakerbox, by the way. I've been to Speakerbox and heard some of their issues and concerns. So there is a crossover with those, with all the sort of group, but it's work in progress, I have to say, because each year you have to start with a new group of young people. Yeah. So it's a bit difficult in one way, but if we get.
So how many do you have on the Changemakers group?
Well, at the last post, there were about 7 or 8 who were involved in it. So now they moved on, so we're doing a completely new group.
Okay. Thank you, Kath. Now I saw Lisa, followed by Lynette, and then James.
Thank you. I'm just trying to relate this back to what we heard about in the serious case review, in that obviously this is packed full of facts and figures and percentages and numbers, and I know there's no easy way to present what we're actually talking about here, but behind each of those numbers is a child, and I'm very conscious that some of the problems that were identified in the serious case review are very likely to affect a lot of these children. Particularly where the turnover of social work staff and several other issues that were picked up. And I just wondered if there's a way of including in this report monitoring progress on the recommendations that came out of the serious case review, just so that we can make sure that children who might well be affected by some of those problems aren't just numbers on a page anymore.
Yeah, I mean. It does. The issues around the serious group are covered in the annual report, in the sense that we have a subgroup which monitors the action plan. I think it's a question of how much detail we can go into, but I think I'll certainly have a look at that and think about how we can bring this to life a bit more, if you like. I mean, I think this is just you have to remember, this is a very high-level summary of a huge amount of work that takes place. What it doesn't. It's just impossible to go into detail, because I suppose my worry is we spend so much time doing this report and that people will not read it in the end, and that's my worry about it.
I appreciate that, but I'd like us to be able to feed in a useful way, and if we're presented with just figures, it's difficult to do that. But I know it's tricky.
I don't think I'm going to say we got it right, perfect, and I think I'm always willing to listen to ways in which we can improve how we can bring this, make it a much more meaningful document. But it is ultimately an annual report, which is a high-level summary. But we could certainly share a lot of other information with you if you wanted it. But that, to me, is the board's key. That's the bread and butter day-to-day work that the board carries out. And I think you just have to be careful we don't kind of.
I know. I meant just because a serious case review is relatively rare, that the issues that it does throw up. Is there a way of just keeping track of?
Well, we do. To be honest, we do keep track of it. We have what's called a serious case review subgroup, which I chair, which not only looks at serious case reviews that we've done, but also other reviews that we're doing, because we do other reviews which are not serious case reviews. And we've got an audit and learning subgroup of the board which works closely alongside that, so that we're constantly looking at and learning from cases where we think we could do better. So that is all there, and what it might be worth doing, and actually we do present that and we present that regularly to the board. So what I will do is think about how some of that can be summarised, but not necessarily in the annual report. Some other process.
We can always signpost from that report, because it is an important document. I think Lisa's right.
So I'm happy to think about that.
Case study is a good way of
breaking
it.
Right. Thank you. Is that right?
Yes. You identify the number of care leavers on page 21, paragraph 555. And it's very clear that Southwark, even by comparison with neighbouring boroughs and London-wide, have far many more children who are care leavers, and therefore I would understand more children in care. And I just wondered how the board...
sorry, they're looking for your page.
Page 21.
Page numbers at the top.
On the top.
In the supplementary agenda.
Yeah. In the report that we... Am I looking at the right thing?
Yeah.
You're looking at them. They've got the actual report. We've got the report on the agenda.
Sorry. It's anyway about care leavers. And you give us a helpful summary there of the number of care leavers and the number of care leavers statistically there are in other London boroughs and in the neighbouring average. And just to repeat myself, it's clear that Southwark has many more care leavers than any other borough in London. And it's also clear that only 43% of the care leavers are in education, employment or training, or were in education, employment and training in 14-15. That seems to me to be a great many, and it would be helpful if you could comment on that. I'd like to say it's very clear that you would the accommodation, you are beginning to get to grips with that at 78%. That is obviously a good percentage given the paucity of accommodation in London. But it's that education that is really going to be the thing that serves young people in the future, or their employment or their training, and presumably apprenticeships are included in that.
Well, I mean, the board's task is to challenge and make sure that Rory's and the partnership that he works with, not just Rory's service, it's the education and services, and are all kind of geared up to try and tackle that. And it's a national problem about people not being in education or training. And my role is to make sure that they tackle it, and that's why we monitor it and look at it and challenge him about it.
My question is, it was 46% last year and the year before, in this report, 46% in 2012-13, and similarly in 13-14. It's gone down. It's not 50%. And I just wonder if we could hear perhaps what's being done to address it.
I think that's
Yeah, we've got a specialist worker in the service whose job is to work with those individuals who might have more difficulty than others in finding employment, education and training. So that it's a specialist worker, so that he will handhold if necessary, because it's quite a challenge for some young people to complete the forms. So we run sessions for them in the Telford Place, which is the aftercare service down there, and continue to monitor them right the way through to their 21st birthday, or even beyond that if they're in higher education. So we're working with some that are 23, 22, 23. So we've got the monitoring of them, the regular visiting of them, and the specialist provision to provide advice and guidance for them. We also do tie in with the local DWP, so through the money that we got, and the resources we got through our Troubled Families provision, we've got a good sort of relationship with the DWP, and it's about how we can enable young people to get into employment as well. So we're exploring all the avenues we can with those young people. And as I say, they have the support of a personal advisor beyond the age of 18, so they're not left to be on their own, and we have specialist provision as well. In addition to that, through our learning development unit, we're also exploring apprenticeships for young people. So as many people as possible we get onto apprenticeships. We've always been very good in Southwark at bringing young people through apprenticeships, actually working in the council. So at any one time there's quite a few young people who've been through the care system and have done well working for the local authority. So there's a number of different strands, but it is an area that we do have a focus on. We've just launched this new belongings process where we're working very closely with the speaker box and the care leavers themselves, so that they're very much involved in the process of what would work for them. So it's about engagement and understanding what works better for them, how we might be able to get them involved in the workplace.
And what's the turnover of staff, your specialist advisor staff?
That's pretty stable, that part of the workforce. The PAs is a very low turnover of PAs. It's a very rewarding role. The employment advisor, that's been the same person now for a while, so we've got no concerns about turnover there. So we've got a consistently knows all of the young people and can be putting in advice and support to them.
So is there monitoring of that to try and lift it above 50%?
Yes, so we do monitor that information. We do returns as well on the progress in that area, very, very detailed analysis of all the young people and what are the issues. Are there any themes emerging about who's in and who isn't in employment, education and training? So there's a lot of scrutiny of that cohort.
Thank you.
I've seen Sunny and I've seen someone from the audience actually. So do you want to?
Yeah, just one quick question. Just follow up from the question you just been asked about on page 21 on employment and training. Just taking you back again, there have been, of course, 2012, 13, 46%, 13, 14, 46%, and then 14, 15, 43%. It seems there isn't any significant improvement, and yet we're putting resources against it. I'm concerned that it seems it's not aspirational enough. So therefore, the question about monitoring and review is, is been asked. What
we would certainly welcome.
What's been put in place to make sure we don't, this downward spiral doesn't continue?
Well, there's no doubt it's gone down. So we are putting a lot of effort into that. But we certainly welcome the contribution of members in terms of raising the profile of young people in the care system and job opportunities for them out there in the community, with all of the regeneration and employment opportunities that are happening in Southwark, about how we can create opportunities for care leavers out there.
I mean, I can assure you, you've got the support of the entire council chamber to that end, really. I mean, one of the things that we've been doing, Kath and myself and a few other people, is we've had a focus group on employment, and there was actually, I can't remember the name of the person, but actually he was an advocate. Jane Scott brought him along, and a young person who'd been in the care system, and they have given us a lot of material to go with. But the upshot is, well, one of the things, the initiatives, is that we're going to try and waive, you know, on the apprenticeship course that you have to have a certain amount of qualifications. Well, for someone that's had their education disrupted, we want to waive that, really. So, you know, we're all trying quite hard, you know, to have the initiatives, and that's not to undermine the fact that people have raised that, but
no,
it's not an endeavour that you have
self-evident.
Okay.
It's not just paper qualifications that children, young people need.
Yeah, absolutely. They need employment. But sorry, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Hugo. So you might have noticed a whole group of young people is here recently. So some of us are from Southwark Youth Council. So me, Rola, and Fuller from Southwark Youth Council. And then we've also, so we're basically, we're like some councils for young people. And we've also got some members from the Southwark Tenants Association Youth Forum. I have got a question for...
All right, okay, because we are coming on to the youth part after this section, so if you want, you had a question.
Yeah, so, I mean, I like support the guy over there was saying it's pretty concerning. I mean, not only to see that the majority of people leaving care aren't in education, employment or training, but that's actually been consistent over the past few years, even as youth unemployment has come down. Because I also work for this organisation called Youth Employment UK. We work with young people to try and get them jobs. And I was wondering, do you do any work with the third sector, with any voluntary organisations? So I was thinking, you know, clearly you have some problems here getting your young people jobs. I was wondering if you could actually...
I think that's a fantastic idea. Yeah, that we should be looking at who else we can bring in to help with this. So definitely like to follow that up.
There is a group called Second Chance who are working with people who have had their education disrupted, and they do a 6-month training scheme, and then they get people into work, and they mentor them for a whole year after they've been in work. So you don't just get them there, they get them to stay there and succeed. And there's also PCAN, who are providing a lot of education, a lot of jobs for people, helping people to get into jobs as well. Seeds, our Seeds programme.
So we're not short of initiatives, but it's getting them to work that's the important issue. Sunny, I'm going to look at
I just wanted to quickly, I mean, I do appreciate that a few names of agencies who can provide additional support have been thrown around. We're not short of that in the borough. Let's be realistic about that. I think what we need to do is to be more innovative in our approach. And that's what we need to challenge the officers to do. It's not about money, it's about how more creative, how more innovative can we be. Maybe the approach we've been using hasn't been effective. So what is the better way? Can we deal with it? Because definitely this is not acceptable and we need to move.
Well, I feel a recommendation coming there. But in the interests of... yes, Michael. Now, actually, before I take Michael, I did want to say, I'm sorry I've overrun, but I think you'll agree that that was a discussion worth having. Michael, I'll allow you to sum up because it is your report, but I will say, you know, it's just fantastic that we've got an excellent relationship with the Safeguarding Board. The members, I needn't tell you, but we're absolutely committed to supporting this work in any way that we can. We'll give you a note of the discussion and any recommendations that we can do for joint work, in particular on the issues that Lynette has raised. So without further ado, if you want to sum up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's good to have, I think it's really good that you're having a discussion about young people who are not in employment and education, because that's one of the issues the board has challenged and raised through its work. And so we're doing our job as far as I'm concerned. But I think from another point of view, it would be worth having your committee having a good look at that area.
Yeah.
As an issue, and it's not essentially a safeguarding issue,
No.
but it is an issue which is really important and has some safeguarding elements to it. Because if you're not in employment or education, you're more likely to be at risk. So I think it'd be good if you do. But I just wanted to also say, I know there are a lot of young people here, and we'd like to connect you with our Changemakers programme. So from today, if there's some way you can let me have details of what you do, and we want to engage with the Youth Council, the Changemakers want to do that, and that's what one of the plans is, to broaden the scope of people who can be involved in helping the young people, helping the board understand how we can safeguard young people better. So anything you want to contribute to that process would be really welcome. So I think that was the most important thing I wanted to say, really.
We can exchange information before you leave today.
Okay, well, I've got the perfect opportunity to do that. Before we move on to the next item, which is all about young people, we will have a 5-minute break. But I would like to say thank you very much to Rory and Michael. That was an excellent discussion. Thank you.